Hi, I'm Amanda Morgan from NotJustCute.com, and I'm here with the first Friday Q&A for the month of May. I have a great question here from Chris, and I don't think that I have all the answers here, so I'm hoping to get some feedback from you to help out with this question. It says, how do I teach young children to stand up for themselves without misleading them to show negative emotions towards others? Here's an example. I want them to speak up, but it breaks my heart to hear, you make me sad when you say I can't play, turn into, you are mean. I'm not going to be your friend forever. And I love this point. I know I can't make everyone fall in love with each other, but I want them to at least feel comfortable around their peers. This is a great question because we do want children to stand up for themselves, to use their words, as we often say, to say, I'm not done yet, or I don't like that, or, stop doing that. We want them to stand up for themselves when they're uncomfortable. We want them to use their words instead of physical aggression when they have a conflict. We want them to talk it out. But we also don't want that to turn into a verbal assault or verbal aggressiveness, which is very common, especially with girls. That tends to be just a common go-to use verbal aggression. Just along those developmental lines, girls tend to be more verbally aggressive where boys may be more physically aggressive. So I tend to look at it as two different skills. The first skill you're teaching is to use their words. So talking to them about how does that make you feel, or tell him how that made you feel, or teaching them, to say, please stop, I don't like that, and then to get help or to get space from each other. So you can talk about those social skills and teach that, the importance of standing up for yourself and using your words, or the importance of saying stop and getting help. And you can teach those social skills in role-playing situations, or using puppets, or using stories that have similar problems that arise, and then talking through the problem-solving steps as a group or one-on-one as you're talking to children about how to solve those social problems. So I think one concept that you're trying to teach is for children to use their words, to stand up for themselves and show an appropriate amount of assertiveness. Now I think the other lesson comes when you talk to children about how words can hurt people, and to be aware of that and to avoid doing that. So one way that I have read about that I think is a great example is in Mariah Bruhl's Playful Learning book. She talks about using a paper heart and telling a story about a child as they go throughout the day, and mean things are said or done to them throughout the day, and it rips a little piece of the heart off every time it happens in that story. And then you retell the story with a new paper heart, and it stays whole through the whole story because as you're interacting with the children, they're helping you to come up with the more polite words or the kinder acts that help keep that heart intact. It's a great example in Playful Learning by Mariah Bruhl, and it's one that you could do with a group or one-on-one. There's another one that as I was thinking about this question, it's kind of funny because growing up, my mom did a lesson with our family. There are 6 kids in our family, and so as you can imagine, there are times that we would not get along with each other. And so she taught us a lesson using a bag of chips, and a similar situation. Every time something mean was said, it crunched the chips a little bit more, and then you get through the whole story and open up the bag, and it's just a bunch of broken crumbs at the bottom. And it sounds silly, and it is actually kind of a running joke still in our family among my siblings. But the fact that I still remember that decades later tells me that it was effective, that we remembered it. We remembered what she said. We remembered that the point was, don't crunch their chips, don't hurt people's feelings. Think about what you're saying and think about how it makes them feel. So I think, Chris, that it's a two-part approach. Teach children to use their words and give them some of the scripts that they can use. That will also help them to use the appropriate words. If you kind of practice common scripts, if you're having common situations, so practicing those words, it makes me feel bad when, or can I have a turn when you're done, please, is one I'm often using as an example of social scripts. But giving them word for word how they might be able to say it in a polite way so it becomes so familiar that they know how to kind of follow that framework in an appropriate way. And then separately, teach some lessons about how words can hurt people and how we need to choose our words carefully because they can hurt people's feelings. And then kind of bringing those two lessons together, that we need to use our words to stand up for ourselves, but that we need to be aware that what we say can hurt people's feelings. With older children, I've seen in some schools that I've been in, there's some signage that talks about the difference between being assertive and being aggressive. And so you could do kind of a sorting technique or exercise to point that out, the difference between being assertive. Someone who's assertive looks people in the eye and says, I feel There's kind of your social script outline, where somebody who's being aggressive uses their body or belittles other people. So you can kind of talk about those two differences. You could even create characters for younger children. So there's an assertive character and there's an aggressive character to kind of help with that sorting, labeling, and just making it a common practice to discuss these types of things. And in your classroom experience, Chris, if you're noticing people that do a really great job of working through these social problems, or even if you're right there coaching them through it, it's great to then discuss that when you get together in a whole group setting and talk about, this problem came up, probably ask for the children's permission first so it doesn't make them feel uncomfortable, but then with their permission, talk to the whole group, say this is what came up, and that's a really hard thing to work out, and guess how we did it, and talk them through it so that they have an example of how to do it. Or if you think the children will be too uncomfortable having their play experiences shared, you can then just translate what happened into a puppet show and nobody needs to know who it's about, really. So those are my thoughts. I would love to hear everybody else's thoughts or resources you might be able to share to help give children the tools to stand up for themselves and to be assertive without being verbally aggressive or creating negative relationships with each other. I think the other thing that you point out here, Chris, is a great point, that we can't expect all the children to love each other and have everybody be their best friend. It's not realistic. And if we think about our own relationships as adults, there are people we love to be around and there are people that we've just learned to be around. And so it's good to teach kids that you don't have to think everyone is your best friend, but you do need to respect everybody. And we need to talk about what that means. So I think you can teach that, you can help them practice that, and you can give them some scripts, some outlines, especially emphasizing those I feel statements, because those are usually a safe place to start. It's never wrong to feel a certain way. I feel hurt when you say that. I don't like it when you say that. It's also okay to teach kids, I need some space right now. Maybe we can play later. And talk about different scripts that might be applicable in your classroom. What would you like to be hearing them say, or like to hear them saying in your classroom? And then practice that with role playing or with puppets and give them those words and a lot of practice with those words. And when they need some social scaffolding in their problem solving, you can give them those words and it becomes familiar to them. So I hope that that's helpful. I'll put some links below as well, hoping those will be helpful for you also. And then I would love to hear some more comments from people to help out with this situation that I know is common in other places other than just in Chris's classroom. So thank you again for tuning in for the First Friday Q&A, and I will see you here again next month.